Hello, everyone. My name is Lisa Bailey. Thank you so much for joining us today for this conversation with one of my old friends, actually. So it's a joy for me to be here with you. I really want to thank Internews for asking us to be a part of this conversation. Hello to the Internews Health Journalism Network, and of course, the Clara Lionel Foundation for making this all possible. As you may know, it is all about building community resilience through emergency communications and preparedness. And there are a number of objectives that are a part of this project being rolled out in Barbados and Dominica. I'm based in Barbados, and so is Steve, actually. And this is all really important work because we're aiming, as I said, to build community resilience. We need to be able to be prepared to handle the future climatic, health, and environmental emergencies. And dare I say, not only future, but what's happening right now. So, objective one is strengthening disaster communication. We want to expand the delivery of humanitarian news and reporting, and also increase knowledge and access to a One Health approach. Now, we talk a lot about this One Health approach, but I think one of the activities that this project is working on is actually building a toolkit for information providers. So I really want to say thank you to Internews, Clara Lionel, for doing this broadcast and the ones that they've done before. I followed a number of them and they all have been really, really interesting. Today, now, we're going to be talking with Mr. Steve Daniel, a gentleman I met a good couple of years ago. He is also a fellow of the Climate Change and Health Leaders Fellowship Program, which is part of a PAHO coordinated project funded by the EU and being run by the University of the West Indies. He was one of the first fellows from 2021 to 2022. He is an environmental health specialist with responsibility for water sanitation and climate change in the Ministry of Health and Wellness in Barbados. He's the technical focal point for climate change and health within the ministry and is presently responsible for supporting the development of the Barbados's Health National Adaptation Plan. In addition, he coordinates the development of regulatory procedures and policies for water quality, sanitation, and the management of environmental pollutants in Barbados. He's a recipient of a Barbados National Development and British Chevening Scholarship and has a wide portfolio of technical training. And you know what? At heart, when it comes down to it, he's just an environmentalist. He loves the outdoors, he loves people, and he loves to talk to people about the work that he's doing. So, welcome, Steve. It's great to talk with you again.
Thank you, Lisa. I feel so flattered and honored by the way you introduced me. I'm lost for words, but I'm really grateful for you giving me this opportunity. Thank you, Internews and the facilitators of this. And I'm really happy to be here, and I am keen on speaking on the simple things that we have been trying to do, which hopefully will make big impacts.
Agreed. And we have people, I'm sure, from all over the world looking at what's happening here in Barbados. So we're glad that you can talk to us about your project. You call it a little project. I think it's huge and I think it has amazing potential. So we want to remind you at some point, we will give you the opportunity to ask any questions you'd like to ask. But we're going to hand over to Steve now. He's going to present his project and then we'll have a conversation. So over to you, Steve. I know you have a presentation you wanted to share as well. So over to you.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. I don't control the technical side of it, so we can proceed. Well, this project was part of the Climate Change and Health Leaders Fellowship Program, and it presented me a tremendous opportunity to look at an issue that has been plaguing some communities in Barbados. And it is an issue that has been exacerbated through the changing climate. We have a philosophy because I work in the Ministry of Health as well as an environmental health specialist, and we have a philosophy that suggests that we need to do whatever is possible to ensure that a changing climate does not compromise the quality of life for Barbadians in the context of health. So what we are looking at in this particular instance is an ecosystem, wetland ecosystem in the south of the country. You can proceed, please, with the next slide. Barbados, for those of you who don't know, is the most easterly of the Caribbean islands. So what tends to happen is that if there are weather systems traveling across the Atlantic, Barbados tends to get them first as long as they're more on the southern trajectory. And as a result of that, we've had a history of severe weather systems, hurricanes, and flooding. And this and sometimes flash floods, just situations that come out of nowhere. The study area that we really concentrated on is the Graham Hall area, which is in the southern part of the country, and we can proceed. It's really a beautiful wetland ecosystem. Next slide. Right, but the problem we have with this ecosystem, it sits on approximately 33 hectares, or you can call that about 88 acres. And it is a community, it is a wetland that sits in the middle of a community. The southern part of Barbados is very active. It has lots of tourists there. It also has major communities and primary schools. There are elderly people. There's a really large susceptible population living in the area. The wetland is said to be a Ramsar designated area, meaning it is a protected site. But unfortunately, it is a area that there is not much control in place. So to explain the problem is that lack of access to the wetland to manage it has created situations where there's un, un surveillance, lack of surveillance from mosquito populations. When you have the dry season, in a strange way, you also get mosquito problems coming from the wetland, because you tend to have pockets of water that are isolated from the larger bodies of water where there are no fish to control mosquito larvae and things like that, and you get influxes of mosquitoes traveling into the communities. For those of you who don't know, Barbados is endemic for dengue fever. And every year we struggle with issues associated with dengue fever. So what is unique about this wetland is that in periods of drought, we get mosquito problems, and of course, in periods of heavy rains, etc., we also get mosquito problems. So it is an area that really requires some level of management. That these areas that would facilitate mosquito breeding, we can better control these situations. The picture that we're seeing here would just give you a simple idea of how inaccessible and difficult it is to control from that perspective. Next slide, please. This was an area that used to be accessible. We had a few walking paths that would allow for general workers from the Ministry of Health. They are literally post at the wetland, and their job is to just try to carry out some level of mosquito surveillance wherever they can get access to without endangering themselves. But what we have here is that post Hurricane Elsa in 2021, the place was in a total mess. And we had other areas not previously identified that we were getting mosquitoes coming from as well. So this just gives you an idea of how well and unmanaged the area is. Next slide. Now, coming out of the project, we basically wanted to come up with how can we address this situation in a sustainable way. But we didn't want it to be a matter of myself leading the project, coming in and telling the community what we are going to do. So we really wanted to come up with a vision for the area, and we wanted the community to participate in that. Proceed, please. So therefore, our objectives would have been to engage the community and get them to fully participate and tell us, what do you think you would like to see happen here, and what role will you be willing to play in maintaining the wetland in a sustainable way. Obviously, we educated them as well as to the importance of it, and let them understand that the lack of management of this wetland is really responsible for the health risks associated with dengue fever and the mosquito-borne diseases. Um, we also wanted to engage other stakeholders in the community, meaning in the tourism sector, because we wanted to introduce the One Health approach in a non-academic way, but in a more practical way, to let them understand that every single thing you can do within the environment could potentially have public health benefits or negative public health impacts. Proceed. Our priority, therefore, was to bring the issues to the fore with respect to the government of Barbados, who at that time only through particular departments, it wasn't a wholesale accepted issue for the government. So we wanted to bring it to their attention, and as well as I mentioned, engage the stakeholders as much as possible and try to bring together some form of partnership between the government and the people within the and the stakeholders within that community. Proceed. The activities that we undertook involved on-site visits. Of course, that was very important because that is the way that we allow those persons that might have to literally see what is happening and understand the scope of the challenges that we face. The community, again, it allows them to say what they feel about it and tell us, because we really didn't want to prescribe a solution for them. We really want that whatever we come up with as a vision, it came directly from them. So we invited them to all of the site visits, stakeholder meetings, and we also carried out a survey with them to hear exactly what they would like to have happen. Proceed. We managed to get major players from the government of Barbados to attend these site visits. In the picture to your left, the lady standing right in the center um, is the Deputy Prime Minister. So we managed to get her to attend one of the site visits. The picture on the right, the gentleman in black wearing the red mask is the minister responsibility for the environment. It is important that we got these people here because they would allow the community to say to them what they want, and they then would be able to make the decision as it relates to resources and how we can work together to put a long-term sustainable plan in place. So we were very successful in getting people on the ground to actually visit the site. The other persons here are the heads of other government departments. So for instance, we will have the Coastal Zone Management Unit, the Environmental Protection Agency, the National Conservation Commission, Drainage Unit. It's a wide range of stakeholders so that you can understand the need for the One Health vision to apply to this, to solving this problem and creating a long-term plan. Proceed. Oh, we also engage stakeholders, our partners from the EU. They also benefited from some of the site visits, and PAHO as well. We also engage them to allow them to come and experience what this wetland is like, to understand the scope of the challenges that we face. What we have here is the Ministry of Health workers, as I indicated to you, the gentleman in the reflective jacket. He, along with his team, what their job is to do is to clear up areas of the wetland where the fish cannot access. Because as long as the fish cannot access certain wet areas, the biological control of mosquito larvae goes out the window and you get massive mosquito breeding. So we allowed our partners from the EU and PAHO to also come along and enjoy the experience of understanding the scope of what is needed in this wetland. Proceed. So we, through the momentum that we picked up through this, it brought a new level of energy to the Ministry of Health, to the general workers, and we got our surveillance plan going again. Everyone was energized and participating. We can proceed. With respect to our results, the members of the community indicated that what they want for the area is not any massive development. They want it to remain a natural wetland, but they want it to be a useful wetland. They want it to be able to access the site for recreational purposes, for fishing. They wanted it to be beautified, whether it is a tourism attraction. They just wanted it to be utilized in a meaningful, sustainable way, which would benefit both them as well as the objectives of the Ministry of Health, being able to better access the location to carry out better surveillance of mosquitoes and to bring better control to that issue. So out of that as well, what is more important is that we also got a formal committee formed through the Deputy Prime Minister that pulled together all of the major stakeholders, including the community leaders. And so far we've had 5 one-hour meetings. And the purpose of this committee is to advance the implementation of the plan step by step, as we are supposed to develop the steps for the implementation of the plan together. Proceed. This was just a picture of what we agreed to, and you can see that it is something that looks more attractive now. And what is important, the yellow dots that you see here, those signify areas where you should be able to traverse by foot so that you have access through the wetland, that we can control the public health challenges that we would be concerned with and maintain the site in terms of the ecological health of the wetland. And it would also be useful then for the community, for recreation, for exercise, for tours, for paddle boats, for whatever. And it would also improve the overall aesthetic of the area. It would bring tremendous benefits. And of course, the climate change impacts then with respect to the ongoing hurricanes and the droughts will allow us then to better manage the public health challenges that come along with those. So this was just a draft concept that the community were happy with to say, well, yes, that kind of looks like what we would like to see happen up here. Person. Thank you. And I hope that I tried to keep it as brief as possible, but I hope it was informative and it it gives you an appreciation of the type of work we're doing and the excitement that we're trying to generate on the ground, both between stakeholders, government stakeholders, non-governmental, and the community as well. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Steve. I think it is such a good example. It touches on so many things. The first thing I want to talk about is that water is life, right? If we do not have clean water or we have water that is making us ill, whether it be, I mean, in general, the water in that area is not used for drinking, but it is definitely a place where people fish. It is a place where people go to take walks. I know a couple people who walk in that area. You did not say, but we know it's also close to where you live. So this is
Yeah.
close to your community as well. So I think when I visited that area, I certainly didn't understand that dry season can cause mosquitoes. I don't know if you want to explain a little bit more about that because it was hard for me to understand until I saw it.
Yes, I'll be happy to do that, Lisa. And I, 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 I would never get tired talking about this because, as you said, it is something that's not normally appreciated. But from the slides, you would have seen our EU and PAHO partners working in a bushy area. These areas under normal wet conditions would be covered in water. But because of the drying out due to droughts, it appears as if there's nothing there. But underneath all that brush are massive pockets of water. And because of the congestion of the brush and the drying out of the areas to the wider water bodies, what it does, it isolates fish from having access to these areas. And when there's no fish to the area, the mosquito larvae basically takes over. And that is what we refer to as biological control. Where there are no chemicals involved, we try to encourage ecosystem health and let the fish and the aquatic life control the mosquito population. And under wet conditions, normal conditions, these things are under control by the fish population. The drying out creates those pockets that eliminates the fish, and the mosquitoes basically thrive. Because though it looks like there's nothing there, trust me, there's lots of water under that brush.
Of course, I shared the videos with them because I thought it would be nice to actually see the area. Nothing beats being there yourself, but this is an
Absolutely.
ecosystem, right? They're fishing there because it's very close to the sea. So people might be thinking, well, how is this swamp? I call it a swamp. It is not a swamp. It's a mangrove. It's an unmanaged wetland. Tell us about this ecosystem.
Yes, it is as you indicated, it's a mangrove wetland that is only connected to the sea now through one single drain. You're actually seeing it right here on the screen right now, and it connects directly to this beach as you're seeing on the screen as well. And over time, it has become more fresh because the connection between the sea has been diminished significantly, and it is more fresh water now. But it has natural springs within it that produces fresh water all the time. So you only get that saline interface when the drain between the sea and the wetland is established or when it is open. So as a result, it is a diverse ecosystem with both freshwater fish and fish that can tolerate salt. It also attracts birds, migratory birds, and it has tremendous potential for ecotourism because there are features to it that if you like the outdoors and you like nature, you would really appreciate the beauty that can come from this wetland. Unfortunately, it is also a dangerous place because in its unmanaged state, you need to know where not to walk or where you can walk safely. And that is also part of the problem. The extended droughts that we get due to climate change sometimes actually creates other dangers as well because as I indicated, you see areas that appear to be dried out, but they're just floating dry reeds. And if you walk on them, you can go right through them down into maybe more than 20 feet of water. So the impacts of climate change has really put us in a position where we really need to act and determine what the sustainable plan will be for this area so that we can maintain it in a safe way.
Now, this conversation is all about action, right? So, One Health in action, preparing communities as part of your project and as part of your work, as this is part of your area where you live and work as well. What has been the result of this in your talks with the community? Were they aware of some of this before? Were you able to kind of teach them and bring awareness while you were doing this project?
Well, I can tell you I was pleasantly surprised at the amount of knowledge that I found in I learned a lot actually from the community because I mean they have a long history with the wetland. They can tell me about times when it was more accessible because it was owned by a plantation and different resources would have been employed then to do different things at the site. There used to be bird shooting there in the past. So because of the systems that were previously there in our far history, they can tell you about really good times in there, and they can tell you about different species of animals that no longer exist, different species of fish they no longer see. And they very much do appreciate the issues with respect to the mosquito breeding. And you would hear different people saying, I mean, this person caught dengue fever, that person caught dengue fever, and automatically they link it to the wetland. And they all indicate that, it needs to be managed in a formal way. So there's also a primary school there, and in interviews with the school itself, I also got some very positive feedback from some of the teachers and the students chirped in about what they know about the wetland. And they all appreciate its ecological value. And at a higher level, they really do understand the public health implications for it being in the state it presently is in. The climate change linked to this was what I was able then to deliver to them to help them to understand when the dry season comes, the reason why you're still getting mosquitoes is because of this. And then when the wet season comes, it creates other pockets of water where water wasn't previously existing, and you get the same issue as well. So it was very engaging and it was very rewarding at the end of the day. I learned from them and they learned from us.
As it should be. And I think sometimes as specialists, we think we're going to impart knowledge, but I think when we go and we listen, we realize that communities have a lot of knowledge, as you said, that can help us to try to create solutions.
Yeah.
Now, do you think the whole concept of One Health is really understood by different stakeholders? I know as part of your project, you had to have a symposium. I was lucky to be there as well. Do you think One Health is understood by the different stakeholders?
I think it is better understood now, given the work that we've been doing. There's a lot more that needs to be done because, and through the symposium as well as this project, it by engaging our partners. So, for instance, the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of the National Conservation Commission. When I actually engaged them on, do you understand why the Ministry of Health wants to work with you? And we look at the issues relating to lack of water and the quality of agriculture products and the impact that has on nutrition and ultimately on health. And then we can do the same thing from go through different ministries and show them how it all leads back again to health and explain to them the whole idea of One Health is something that it is not a health ministry or a health agency issue. It requires us all to work together because there are areas to do with agriculture that you can do better than the Ministry of Health can, which will have positive health impacts. So what I'm saying is that it was very rewarding, their participation, and the fact that they were like, yes, I now feel like I'm a health partner. So it is better as a result of some of the work that we've started to do, but we do have a long way to go. And there are many other partners that I hope that we can draw into this as well.
Agreed, agreed. That question came from YouTube, and we want to encourage you all that you can ask us any questions. If we don't have the answer right now, we'll find it for you and send it later. But we want to encourage you to ask any questions. You have a specialist here in the field, both living in an area where we are seeing the impacts of climate change every day. I think as you were talking about partners in health, I had to cast my mind back to the pandemic. Um, I think that showed us that if there's no health, there's nothing, right? As you also described the area, I hope people understand that Barbados is very dependent on tourism, and the Graham Hall area is smack dab in the middle of the South Coast, the busy South Coast, very close to St. Lawrence Gap. If you've never visited Barbados, you need to come visit. And everybody goes to St. Lawrence Gap. So this impacts so many things. It impacts economics. It impacts education if the children can't be at school. So I think it's important for people to understand the wide-ranging impacts of something as small as a wetland in a community.
I'm glad, Lisa, that you raised the whole tourism aspect of it because we did attempt to engage some tourism partners. That is one area that we were not as successful as we would like to be. But in having conversations with them on the phone, they did, and after explaining to them, we need to get things like mosquito prevalence under control for obvious reasons. You don't want your guests to be concerned. You don't want your guests to pick up diseases here in Barbados. And they do understand that from a conceptual perspective, but we would need more time to work on this One Health approach that we can really bring in more partners, as I indicated, especially the tourism sector, because they were keen after you really engage them, you have simple conversations with them and say, it's not our job alone to fix these problems that you will benefit from. I really do think that we would do it better if you assist us and come along as a partner under the One Health umbrella. So I'm really glad you did mention tourism because yes, it is an economic driver, and economics also relates to positive health outcomes and increased standard, improved standard of living. So I'm glad you raised that as well.
We have another question from YouTube. They want to know how has the media and other information providers been engaged to highlight projects like this in Barbados? You can start, and I can probably answer that as well. But I'll let you start in terms of your
Well,
project. Was the media part of it?
well, Lisa, that that what we call in Barbados that was a bouncer of a question because it again highlights where we need to do more work. It's a shame that we would have worked on this and done so much, but now that that question has come, I can't really identify much media attention outside of the good work that the PAHO did through their health communication networks. We got most of the attention through agencies such as PAHO and through the fellowship itself. We did get some attention from the media through the symposium. It was a short feature on the news of that night, speaking about the One Health symposium that brought together all the partner, but it was just basically a short clip it. But I think that more attention needs to be paid to the work that needs to be done in itself and the project itself. It would be really good if we can really get more attention to that and bring people on in that perspective, in that way, because for them to know about it, I think that it would carry us further.
Now, I didn't bully you the bouncer and leave you alone. You know I would help you out on that one. So yes, we
I
did
appreciate
create
it.
videos to help promote this work that Steve was doing in country because I'm the communications and visibility coordinator for the project. But I do admit that, and this is something that we have discussed in the Caribbean with media workers. Sometimes with climate change, it is not seen as the hot topic, and because of that, we actually just recently completed PAHO, in association with the Media Institute of the Caribbean, a series of trainings for media highlighting all of these topics. And I must say that out of it, we had four really great features come out. I believe there were two from Dominica, one from Guyana, and I'll look for the link and put it in the chat. So I think what we have to do is to keep talking about the issues. But what I always tell people is that we need to show the relevance of it to people's lives. People are busy. People have a whole lot of things to worry about. And I think how we frame it as well, right, Steve? I mean, you did not frame this as a only a problem, but we showed it as an opportunity. This is an opportunity to create a managed area that can be used for leisure, that can be used for fishing, that can be used for all kinds of things. So I think the answer to that is there's much more to be done, but I think we've made some inroads through this project, but the work needs to continue.
Yes.
Yeah. So we want to encourage you, of course, to continue to send your questions. We know that this is a project that a lot of people may not know about in other countries, but I will share in the I'll share the link with those who are managing the YouTube and the Facebook channels so you can see more about it. I think it would be nice also to hear from other countries because I'm sure you know of places that have done things like this before. We're not expecting to have all the answers. So I don't know, Steve, have there been other areas that had a problem or an issue like this and came up with a similar solution? Are there any best practices that we're drawing from here or can draw from?
Well, that is another really good question, Lisa. Unfortunately, I can't, from the top of my mind, call to any right now, but I do know that there are other places in the world. I believe in Florida, for instance, they have vector control programs because they do have a lot of mangroves and wetlands. I think Belize as well, they do have surveillance systems for these things as well there. But in terms of partnering and learning from their experiences, that is something that would have to come along with with the next steps as well. Because I'm really glad you mentioned that we are literally winging it here. We are just trying to learn from our experiences. We don't really have any expertise per se on the ground as it relates to the management of wetlands. And we are learning as we go along. We are just basically doing the small bits at a time that will allow us to make small improvements. Of course, it needs resources to be invested into it because it needs to be staffed, there needs to be equipment. And that is why it was so important for the government stakeholders to have been involved. Through the committee that has been created, the government stakeholders, multi stakeholder committee that has been established, we, we're at a stage now where we're developing a budget that should fit into the plan for a sustainable plan that we can present that to the prime minister at some time. And then we would literally know what the numbers are that we're going to be working with to get what we want up and going and as well as to keep it in a sustainable way. But as it relates to the expertise for wetland management, Barbados is a small country. We have a very small mangrove, as I indicated, it's only about 33 hectares. And we're learning as we go along. Though it's small, it still brings its challenges and its dangers as you would encounter with a larger wetland. So, any opportunities for us to learn and partner with places that have these systems in place, we would be very keen to learn and participate in that.
So I was going to ask you what has been the latest with this, but you already told me that they're working on the budget now. You know, I always say the budget is so important if we're going to have action. So I think one of my other questions to you is around the whole concept of how do we prepare communities to mitigate climate change. I'm going to go to another question now before I ask you that one. Someone is asking, would you say the One Health approach in small countries like Barbados and Dominica is unique from other larger countries? So would you say the One Health approach is different in smaller countries?
Um, I can't say it is different because the principle is the same. We basically need all stakeholders and partners to understand what role that everything leads back to health. So, for instance, I've been recently speaking to a set of students from the Barbados Community College on water governance. And as you would know, water governance brings with it three major components: access to water, um, the quality of water, and the protection of the water system itself. And along and through that, each of these three components have health implications. So, for instance, access to water has implications for water wash diseases, hygiene related diseases. If you don't have access to water, you can't maintain a sanitary environment. The protection of the water resource itself relates now to how do you prevent major pollutants and hazards from impacting on your water resources, your rivers, your aquifers, etc., that ultimately will impact upon the health of communities. And of course, then the quality of water in terms of what you drink, what is in the water you drink, and what are you going to put in place to protect it. So these principles, irrespective of the size of the country, I believe they stand firm together. What is important is to keep educating people to let them know that these things do not function as silos. Each of these areas in water governance, there's one agency that's responsible for access. There's another agency responsible for protecting the resource. Without them really understanding that ultimately all of this impacts upon the human well-being, it, that is what we need to keep the One Health vision growing in the way it does. So I think that the principle it really stands the same across communities, irrespective of size.
Okay. Thank you. We have another question. If you thought my first one was a bouncer, well, let's see how you handle this one. So, with the ongoing El Nino conditions this year projected to be the hottest on record, do you think this will place the topic of One Health prominently on the table at COP28? And if yes, to what extent? So, do you think with the serious heat we had this year, do you think the One Health approach will feature prominently at COP? And if yes, to what extent?
Well, Lisa, that is truly a bouncer. But because it is a bouncer, I'm really glad it has been posed here because it's a little above my pay grade for me to find a nicer way to put it because I am not sure how much the health sector is going to be represented at COP. And I'm glad that that question was posed because this is something that we've been lobbying for a long time. We need stronger health representation at COP. And the fact that this question has been posed, it suggests to me that this is a person that ultimately truly understands what we are trying to achieve with One Health, because COP is a perfect platform for the health and the One Health agenda to be presented. Because, as I say, it's only after you engage in partners and stakeholders that you get to realize that it is not yet well understood. And everything that we do for climate change, ultimately, irrespective of energy savings or those types of initiatives, ultimately it leads back to human welfare and human well-being, which is fundamentally a public health indicator. So yes, I am really glad that question was posed, but unfortunately, I cannot say if it will be prominently focused from any other jurisdiction. But unfortunately, I don't think that we have representation from the health sector attending COP. We have not had in previous years, and I'm not sure how we're going to get around that.
I think this year there may be more of a focus on health than usual. I believe there's going to be a health pavilion. So we're
Oh,
hoping
really?
that we'll have more of a focus on health this year, but we'll see, right? We know how these big meetings go. Sometimes other topics may come and stand in the fore, but I think we might see more discussion around health this time. Um, I think there might be a health day, but I'm not
Mm.
going to be there. So we'll be following online as all of you will be. So we'll see how it goes. But yes, and I think working in Barbados and across the region, there seems to be a disconnect sometimes between partners. Um, Disconnect between the partners who work in environment and health, and then you have the persons on the outskirts, the persons who may work in planning or who may work in finance, when really and truly, just like One Health says, this impacts so many different areas, and the only way we're going to have true answers is if we work together. So hopefully we'll see more of that in this COP and going
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah, we'll be following keenly on watching and hoping for that.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pose my last question to you and then give you some time to wrap up. Do you think, what are some of the ways that you think, because I mean, you work in communities. I think in your early days, you were more in the field than you maybe know, but you worked in communities and you know what's on the ground, right? What do you think are some of the realistic ways that small island developing states here in the Caribbean can, as you said, take steps to mitigate climate risks? Are there things that people can do to mitigate the risks?
Yes, absolutely. And the important things for me are education and community empowerment. And I think that those pretty much go hand in hand because the empowerment comes through education, but it also comes through partnerships to some extent where there may be needs for resources that the community itself cannot provide. But once the community is properly educated and they do their part, it definitely will go a long way. There are some things that they can't do anything about. So, for instance, when there are water outages, etc., there's not much they can do, but in the few things they can do to improve their sanitation and keep around them safe, it is important. Many people tend to overlook the aftermath of disasters such as hurricanes as it relates to simple things as water, sanitation, and hygiene. And the inability to properly manage waste disposal and things like that, and the potential health impacts that that will have. These are things that many communities need to be better educated on in terms of what are the emergency type sanitation facilities that you can utilize for yourself in an emergency. If we look at the disaster that occurred in Haiti after the earthquake and the results of the cholera epidemic, the cholera outbreak that occurred there, I think lack of education had a lot to do with that. And that is a testament to indicate the need for more programs that educate the communities in a very simple way. What would your sanitary facilities be like after a hurricane? What can you do for yourself in your own space to ensure that you keep your family safe from fecal oral diseases, for example? So, yes, education, I think, is a very, I don't think I can emphasize that more because as I think of other things, it ultimately leads right back to education. And we have to empower the communities through education as much as we can.
Well, I think that's a great way for us to wrap up the importance of education, community empowerment, and partnerships. And you know what? I think that's exactly what this series has been doing. So I want to say thank you so much to everyone who sent questions, everyone who joined us, everyone who shared this discussion. We want to thank, of course, the Carolina Foundation, Internews, and the Internews Health Journalism Network, and everyone who made this conversation possible. I'm really glad I got a chance to speak with you, Steve, and I hope to talk with you again sometime soon.
Yes, thank you very much, and thanks for everyone for listening to me, and thank you very much for the facilitators for this, and thank you for the wonderful questions that came from the audience because it allowed me to get some things out there that I think are important, and it's good to have a knowledgeable audience watching on. So I appreciate everything.
Agreed. So thanks very much, everyone. Continue to enjoy the rest of your day, evening, afternoon, and until the next discussion, I want you to continue to follow Internews and all the good work that they're doing. Thanks very much, and bye for now.
Bye.